Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. The following 1 hour interview is from a discussion I had with Ed Opperman on April 19th on the Ed Opperman Report, broadcasted live on the American Freedom Radio. We discuss Art Bell and his influence and Ed's involvement with some of his activities during the time he ran Coast to Coast AM. Thanks and enjoy the show. Welcome to the Ed Opperman Report. This is William Ramsey hosting for Ed Opperman. Ed Opperman has been kind enough to allow me to host this hour of his show, and we have a very special guest. His name is Ed Opperman. Ed, are you there?
Yes, thank you, William, for inviting me on the show.
Well, it's great to have you on your show. But today we're going to talk about an interesting subject, a man by the name of Art Bell who recently passed away. He was the founder of probably the top fringe late night radio show called Coast to Coast AM. And Ed has a history with Art Bell, but just to get started, Ed, can you talk a little bit about Art Bell's history or what you know about him before you met him?
Yeah, Art Bell, had that radio show, Coast to Coast, right, in the middle of the night, back in New York. I guess it was on WABC, I think it was. And I would listen occasionally. I'd listen to the show and had about UFOs and ghosts and stuff like that. And I was fascinated by the topics. He had this very spooky kind of a voice and cadence to his voice and his interview style and stuff like that. But I was actually more. I wasn't a big radio listener. I've gone through periods where I would listen to the radio a lot and periods where I didn't. And so toward the end there, or the beginning of my friendship and relationship with Art Bell, I wasn't really listening to the show very often, but I would go to the website every day. I'd check out the Art Bell website, which had a huge audience, it had a huge following. Back then, if you got a link up on the Art Bell website, or if you mentioned your website on the air, you'd get 15 million hits and your website would crash.
Wow.
Yeah, this happened every night. But they had this page on there. It was like an aggregate page where they would have a link to Drudge Report, and a link to all these different news sources and stuff like that. Rents was on there. And I would go there first almost. I think I even had it as my homepage for a while. And I would go there first, and I'd click on that to go to Drudge and go to these different news sources and find out what was going on in the news. Because the Internet was brand new back in those days. This is the 90s. And you had a dial-up. We all had dial-ups. We were dialing up on AOL. Art Bell was on AOL. He had the Art Bell name on AOL.
Okay. And so how did you kind of meet him? And he started, I think the show got almost in the 80s, I think 1997. So he had been around, broadcasting for a while. And tell the audience what happened and how you kind of came into his orbit, Art Bell's orbit.
What happened was I had gone to the website, Art Bell website. And also, too, you could go there and click on old shows and listen to old shows, And but I was on the website, and I saw a message from Keith talking about a feud that was going on. There was a feud going on between Art Bell and David Oates and another character later on who comes into play named Robert A.M. Stevens, who had gone on Rents and claimed that he was a Navy SEAL and he worked for NASA, and he got into a big fight with with Hoagland. It was a whole big bizarre situation. Who was that guy's name again?
So it was David John Oates and Stevens, you said?
Yeah, David Oates was this guy who claimed he invented reverse speech.
Gotcha.
He could take what you said, play it backwards in a special recorder he had, listen to it, and like a truth detector, he could say what you were really thinking, what you were really trying to say. So you had to take lessons in classes from him in order to learn how to do it just like he did it. So there was this whole bunch of followers. I got to tell you something, too. When I first started listening to Art Bell, I kind of believed some of this stuff. I thought maybe this is real and it's been vetted or something. I thought that some of this stuff had some credibility to it. But after I got involved and I started meeting these people, they're all crazy.
Okay.
Crazy. So Keith Rowland had this little notice up there saying, hey, there's this big feud going on, and if you want to read about it, you can go to this link. And it was called a website called Howl, a message board, Howl, Howl.
Gotcha.
So I went there, and the first thing I saw was when I got the gist right away was that there were some threats. The people who were dating David Oates long distance. They had a relationship with him on the internet, and he would come meet them in his van and have sex with them in his van. and he was telling them stuff, and that he thought he was the Antichrist, and he thought he was the second coming. All this bizarre stuff he was saying to them, and they reported this back to Art Bell, and he made a report to the FBI.
Okay, gotcha.
That he was being threatened by this guy, David Oates. Now, when I went to this website, I started reading all this, I started seeing all these threats to these two women who had made these allegations and went to Art Bell, who then went to the FBI. So I made a comment, and I says, well, you know, if you're a witness in an FBI investigation and people are threatening you on this message board, you should go to the FBI immediately because that's a serious crime. Okay?
And this is roughly around the 90s as well, mid-90s?
Yeah, this is like 96, 97, 98.
Okay.
Late 90s. So after I wrote that, the whole place went wild. I guess no one had ever challenged them before, and they were all going back and forth debating me and stuff like that. And what happened was, coincidentally, the reason why I had some spare time that weekend was I lived in a 3-bedroom condo on the top floor in this building, and I was having a new bathroom put in. I was having my bathroom replaced. Okay. And the guy came to do the bathroom. It was supposed to take like 1 or 2 days, but it wound up taking like 3 or 4 days. So I was trapped up there in my apartment. No, we couldn't take a shower, couldn't bathe. So, you know, I was trapped up in there, you know, waiting for the water to come back on. So all I had to do was sit and argue with people on the internet. Okay. So they became convinced, these people on Howl, became convinced that I was actually Art Bell, that I was Art Bell.
You're cut out like a sock puppet or something.
Right, because they saw that I was typing from AOL, and they knew that Art had AOL.
Okay.
So, and that went on for a while. They suspected that I was Art Bell. And this debate went on for months and months and months. At one point, actually, after the lawsuit started, all that stuff came after the lawsuit started. But it went back and forth, and I had sent a message to Art Bell one time, an email, and Keith Rowland actually published it on his website with my email address.
So who's Keith Rowland? I don't know the name of Keith Rowland.
Keith Rowland is Art Bell's webmaster.
Okay, gotcha.
At the time, and he runs that radio station now that the Jimmy Church came out of.
Okay.
Dark Matters, I think it's called.
Okay.
Dark Matters Radio. So Keith had published my email address, and I got very upset about this, and I yelled at Keith. I said, hey, you know, I got all these nuts stalking me here, and now you posted my email address. So I got mad at him about that. So after that, they were on pins and needles about me, because I became like a player in this big debate online. I chose the name Observer. Okay. I was Observer.
Gotcha,
so this went back and forth, and this character came up from Montana. His name was Robert A.M. Stevens. And his story was he went on Jeff Rentz, and when he was first introduced on Jeff Rentz, he went on there and he says, the first thing he says is, I am a Navy SEAL. And then he claimed he worked for NASA, and he had this inside information about UFOs and all this top secret stuff. He was a spy and an astronaut and a NASA and a cowboy and a fireman. The guy was everything. You know? So Art Bell invites him on his show to debate Richard Hoagland. And they had gotten into a big fight on the air right away, and Art Bell hung up on Robert Stevens.
Okay.
And what happened was, we found out later on that behind the scenes, all the people from Oates and that whole group were all listening to the show on the air in their private chat rooms, and they had been egging Robert Stevens on. So Robert Stevens, after that, went on this campaign of harassing and stalking Art Bell, creating websites and pictures and all this kind of stuff, really, you know, annoying Art Bell and making threats and all kind of bizarre stuff. Okay. And Art, too, see, there was this other group, too, that was on the peripheral of all this in the beginning. They really weren't involved in the beginning. There was a group on Usenet called the Art Bell Usenet group, right? Alt Art Bell. And this group called Spam House, which were a bunch of, like, internet stalkers and pranksters and had taken a fascination with Bell as well. And they were always making like little parody songs about him and making these memes and pictures of Art Bell's face, you know, on a monkey or whatever, you know, weird stuff like that. So they had this obsession with Art Bell, but they also would do some rather bizarre stuff too. Like they would go to like alt Usenet groups about kids with handicaps and call them retards and stuff like that and tards. They were just really these tacky internet stalkers.
It's trolls, the original trolls.
Yeah, but in a way, I almost, now coming back thinking later on, I almost think that Art was kind of in on it, and it was kind of like a theater to drum up interest in his show and radio and theater and all that kind of stuff. Because one of these guys, okay, who was involved in Spam House and all this wacky stuff, is the guy who wrote Mel's Hole.
What's that?
Okay, you're not familiar with that? Okay, one of the most favorite stories on Art Bell, the most famous bits and people's favorite bit, was the story of Mel's Hole. And there was this guy, this farmer named Mel, who had this farmland, and he found this big giant hole on his property. And he threw a measuring rod down there and 3 miles of line down there trying to measure it. It's a bottomless hole on his property there. And people are fascinated by this. And one of the characters from this Spam House group claimed that he wrote the bit and he performed the bit, and Art Bell was in on it. And I confronted Art Bell about this too, and it did seem that it was a bit, that's for sure. It was a bit. And he actually even referenced that bit, and he had the guy back, Mel's Hole, back on his finale show, the last show he ever did.
Gotcha.
Even after he knew that these are the guys who were egging on Stevens and Oates and all this stuff. So there was a bit of theater going on back here, but even though there was some theater, there was some serious mental illness too, because one of these guys behind Mel's Hole got an obsession with me, became obsessed with me, and at one point he actually drove about 8 hours in his car from Northern California down to Las Vegas just to knock on my door and see what I looked like, and turn around and drive all the way back.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you opened the door and he just walked off?
Well, no, I opened the door. He knocked on my door, and and I went out there, and he says, "Oh, I'm here to meet a real estate agent. Can I use your phone?" But I got a sixth sense. I could tell when something fishy's going on. You know what I mean? So I sent him on his way. And I live in a gated community. It wasn't easy to get in either. There's a whole other thing too. And his truck was like a landscaping truck that he drove. It was like a beat up old truck. He drove 8 hours. But we found out later on that was him. And one of the things too is, you see, people, and I do a lot of in my private investigation work, I do a lot of email tracing. And at the time, this is the reason why. This is how I invented email tracing. Is because I was being stalked online and by email back in the late 90s. There was no way to identify people or locate people from their email address at the time, because I contacted everybody I knew in the PI business. Nobody knew how to do it. So I actually sat down and started coming up with little tricks and traps on how to locate and identify people from an email address. And the first time I used it was to locate this guy that was stalking me and identify him and find out where he was. And the rest is history as far as Email Revealer goes. Okay.
That's it, emailrevealer.com.
That's right, yeah.
People. So, wow. So that's when it started, and then it just seems like it got heated up even more from that. Is that correct? Yeah.
What happened was things got so crazy with this. Also, too, so he's behind the scenes, too. David Oates had hired this company called DigTheDirt.com. That was a PI company. They're out of business now because of so many lawsuits and problems they had. But he hired them to dig up dirt on Art Bell as well. For what purpose? I don't even know, I think there was something going on. In fact, I know there was something going on, that the people who would go on Art Bell and promote their stuff, like this reverse speech stuff, and sell these kits and classes and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure they were kicking money back to Art Bell.
Art Bell, gotcha.
Yeah.
I think that still happens today. I think that some of these more popular podcasts, they put people on there and they're getting kickbacks that you just don't see.
Oh yeah. But there is a law against that. You're not supposed to be doing that.
Payola, right? Isn't that the
right. Yeah.
So, I think it still happens. Some of these popular shows, they put people on that I know they don't care about, but they're putting them on anyway, which makes me think there's something else to the matter.
I hear you, man. I hear you. So it got to the point where they were stalking Bell so much, and Bell was concerned about threats from Oates, because he did go to the FBI before all this, and people thought that the feud between Bell and Oates started because Oates came on the show and they were playing these reverse speech clips, and there was something called metaphors, where if Oates would hear something in reverse, like let's say he would play something you would say, and in reverse it would sound like the dandelions fly. he would say, well, I can interpret that. What dandelions fly means really means that William Ramsey is gay. Like, I'm thoroughly convinced that if you sit there and play in reverse stuff all day long, it makes you go crazy.
Crazy. Well, I have this stalker who is like a reverse speech person. He just sends me stuff. I'm like, no, this is not happening. I'm not party to any reverse speech analysis. I mean, it's basically just like a mystery box that somebody can make up anything they want.
Exactly. And the thing is, I've met a lot of those, or I've dealt with them online, and they definitely are disturbed, and they've gone a little nuts off the deep end.
So what happened next?
What ultimately happened was they were creating these websites. They were stalking Bell, and it was going back and forth. And finally, one day, Bell decides he's going to file a lawsuit, a $60 million lawsuit against David Oates and Robert Stevens. Now, up until then, I had very little contact with Bell back and forth, just some emails back and forth with him. But what happened is right before, I had a feeling, that he was going to file a lawsuit because he says, I'm going to make a big announcement tonight. So I went on Hal, and I went on this board, and as a bluff, I said, I predict he's going to file a lawsuit tonight. And I got lucky, and he did. He filed a $60 million lawsuit. So after that point, everyone was convinced that I had a pipeline into Bell, and I was talking to Bell and all this kind of stuff. Or that I was working for Bell in some kind of a way. But at that point, I was not. We had very little contact, a couple of emails back and forth, nothing. Okay. But after that, what happened was the whole back and forth fighting was going on. I was talking about it on the air. There was all this stuff going on. And it was taking its toll on everybody involved, because there was a good 25 people that were debating and arguing back and forth pretty much 24 hours a day, like an addiction, like an internet addiction, going back and forth with this feud. Mm-hmm. And what happened was I went and I approached David Oates one day because someone came to me, when one of his ex-girlfriends came to me and said, Ed, he's just about to, he's had enough. He wants to settle. He's done. So I contacted him, and I says, hey, man, do you want to talk a settlement? I can talk to Art Bell, and we can settle this. And he says, yes, I want to settle this. Give me your phone number. So at the time, I had a beeper and cellular phone company, and we used to get these demo lines from the phone companies where you could talk for free for like 9 hours a month on your cell phone. They would give you these free numbers. And it was untraceable. I knew it was untraceable back to me, so I gave him one of those numbers. So we had the first conversation, and he comes out, and he says, yeah, I want to settle, but the only thing is I've paid my lawyer all this money. I'm out $15,000, whatever the amount was, but it was something crazy like that. I've paid my lawyer $15,000, and if Bell's willing to pay for that, then I'll settle, and we'll both go our separate ways. So I contact Bell, and I tell him, hey, listen, I've taken upon myself to try and negotiate a settlement for you here. And he says, shoot me a phone number right away. Okay. So I sent him my phone number, and I started explaining to him, I'm talking, I'm observer, I'm talking to David Oates. He wants to settle, but he's got this legal fee. And he goes, no, he doesn't. And I said, well, this is what he tells me. He said, no, I have his retainer agreement right here. I said, well, how did you get that? He goes, well, when they sent over the complaint to their countersuit, by mistake, they also faxed over the retainer agreement. I know. He goes, it's only $1,500. He goes, here, I'll send it to you. He faxes it over to me.
Oh, my God. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Was he willing to pay the $1,500?
No way. He wasn't willing to. Art Bell is a tough guy. He's a tough guy. He didn't leave his house much at all. Every time I ever called him up, he was home. He never left his house. And later on, too, we got together down in Pahrump. We met at the Harvest Festival a couple of times. But he was a very serious guy. Didn't leave his house. Homebody, shut-in type guy. I met him up in New York too, and very private guy. Ramona was great. Ramona was very talking. She was great to have around. A fun person.
Ramona was his first wife, right?
Yeah, the first wife. Yeah.
Well, Pahrump is kind of out of the way, isn't it? Pahrump in the desert, high desert, right?
Well, it's about it's an hour drive from Henderson. You get out there, and it's a small town. It's a very interesting little town. There's really nothing going on. Either retired or you're a biker, you got a meth lab going on, and you'll have like a house, man, a really nice $150,000 house, and next door is an auto body shop because there's no zoning. You could have a junkyard next to the church. It's like there's no zoning. Just whatever you want goes down there. But he had a very nice house. He had a very nice house down there, like a little private cul-de-sac area, and interesting back. I had all kinds of. He was into all this stuff. He had a big giant propane tank and a satellite dish and all this stuff to be off the grid and solar panels and things, all kinds of stuff like that. So I called back Oates, and I'm pissed off because I said, "Hey man, listen, if we're going to be negotiating here like adults, you can't be lying to me." And I just found out you're lying to me. And I says, You don't have any $15,000 legal fees. He goes, yes, I do. He's this Australian accent. Yes, I do, mate. Yes, I do. I got $15,000 on my tiny fees. And I said, no, you don't, man. I says, I got the retainer agreement right now. I start reading the retainer agreement to him. And he goes, who are you? Where did you get that? Who are you? Who sent you? Right away, they're thinking I'm CIA or I'm,
Yeah, that's funny.
I said, no, I said, you faxed it over. I said, you're lying, man. It was only $1,500. So this goes back and forth. Oh, at one point, too, get this. After the lawsuit was filed and the countersuits were filed, I used to fight back and forth with Rams all the time. With the Rams, we called him Rams because his name was Robert A.M. Stevens. This real shadowy character, a really bizarre guy, too, man. He was like 55 years old. He had a 15-year-old girlfriend. A really creepy guy in a lot of ways. A total con man his whole life. We looked into his background. He never had anything to do with NASA. He never worked for NASA. He was an artist. He donated some art to NASA, and they accepted his art. And he played that into this whole thing that he worked for NASA. He was never in the Navy SEALs. We looked that up, too. He was never a SEAL. And I used to have this guy who worked for me, because I was out of the PI business. At this time, I was in the beeper. I had the beeper company, communications business, cell phones and beepers. But I had a lot of PI friends still and stuff. So I'd hired this guy to do my employment screening when I'd hire new people for the beeper company. So I had him investigate Stevens for me. I said, check out his background, call around to NASA, he worked at NASA. And so he comes back and he goes, Ed, the guy, he says he's an astronaut, a fireman, a cowboy, and a spy. You want me to look this up? Because it was so ridiculous. But I had been I was like sucked into this whole crazy thing. I had actually given this guy some consideration. So at one point, I used to fight back and forth with Stevens, and I would do like little investigative work on him during the day and find out, I talked to people that went to church with him and stuff like that. I would find out the dirt on him. And then I would troll him at night and then hit him with the zinger at the end. Well, hey, I just talked to your neighbors, and zing him with the hard stuff. So he flipped out one night and he started posting these threats about me. He was going to come kill me.
Yikes.
Yeah. So get this. Art Bell takes those threats, right, against me, and he takes them, files a motion over there in Clark County, in Nye County, down there in Pahrump, and gets a restraining order against Stevens for himself because Stevens is threatening one of his fans. Okay? And meanwhile, I'm here on the front lines. I got no restraining order. I got nothing.
And where's Stevens at this time? He's in Montana?
No, yeah, he was in Montana. Staying on a ranch with this other guy.
Gotcha.
So I'm negotiating with David Oates back and forth, trying to get all this stuff settled. And at that point, then once I first gave Art Bell my phone number, it was right around June or July. And after that, he's calling me up 3-4 times a day, with this guy sitting at home doing nothing, calling me up all the time. And we had a lot of, and I liked him, I liked him. He's a likable guy, very likable personality. He has very strong personality, and the way he speaks, you listen to him, you wait for him to finish, because and also he has that power of being on the radio and all that. We had conversations about his show and about Hail Bop, that whole Hail Bop stuff. Right. And he was very, he was affected in his life by the suicide of the Heaven's Gate cult.
And it was because he was reporting that before the cult that there was speculation he was being trailed by a UFO, right?
Right. That he kept having Hoagland on, and they were talking about this asteroid that was coming,
Right.
Yeah. And he was very affected by that, but he would accept no responsibility for it. And he says, listen, there were other people reporting on it. And he would say that, and he would say, I didn't tell these people to commit suicide and things like that. But you could tell that he was just weighed heavily on him and his life. Another thing, too, is the reason all this got started, I guess I should have started with this in the beginning, is what happened was Art Bell had abruptly resigned from radio one night, and people were wondering why. And it turned out, and Drudge knew why. Matt Drudge knew why, and he was going to go on his website and tell what happened, but Art Bell contacted him and talked him out of it. Now, what happened was that Art Bell's son was kidnapped by his school teacher in chains. He was chained up. He was drugged and placed in chains. Yeah, and taken to the school teacher's hideout, and he was raped and molested. So when Art Bell found out about this another thing that sent him into a tailspin.
That was October 13th, 1998.
Right. And that's what made him resign from the radio. He just said, I can't do this anymore. But so rumors started going around, the Art Bell rape, something happened. Everyone knew something happened, and that's when these allegations of Art Bell being a child molester started coming out. And that's what these guys, that's what the dirt that Oates was looking for when he hired those Dig the Dirt guys stuff.
Interesting. And it says here talking about that Ted Gunderson got involved in the whole abduction of his son and accused Bell of it. And then Bell sued Gunderson. And it was really
right.
Settlement. I don't know do you have any idea what that settlement
was? Yeah, I know exactly what happened there. Here's what happened. Okay. With David Oates, what happened with David Oates was when I busted him on the thing, we went back and forth. And like I said, I was talking to Bell like 3 or 4 times a day. And finally, and I talked to Bell's lawyers too. And you know what? I never told Art Bell I was a private investigator, not once during this whole time. I told his lawyers. I said, hey, listen, if you need me, I'm a private investigator. I've been an investigator for years,
Where did he get his legal assistance in the state of Nevada?
No, it was like a Beverly Hills.
So I would think. So he had legit lawyers.
Oh yeah, no, he had a serious law firm there working for him. He took this thing serious, because neither of these other two characters had any money, so he just did this. But Art Bell was very, very litigious. He's had many lawsuits over the years, both as a defendant and he even sued Michael Savage just recently.
I didn't know that. About what?
Savage said some kind of crack about Filipino prostitutes, and Bell took offense to that. Bell was an interesting guy in many ways.
Well, I want to get back to Gunderson. What happened between Gunderson and Bell?
What happened was
just like one of those kind of under this figure that pops up all over the place.
Right. Before we can get to that, we got to finish up what happened with David Oates. Because what happened was with David Oates was Bell came to me and says, Ed, I need you to do an affidavit of your experience of everything that happened with you. No, here's what happened. I talked to him, and I sent him an email. I said, listen, I just had a conversation with Oates, and what he tells me is that he doesn't want to negotiate anymore. He's going to, what's that called, a summary judgment. He's going to take a summary judgment, and then he's going to go and declare bankruptcy. He doesn't care about this anymore. He's not going to fight you anymore. So Bell gets on the phone, boom, 10 seconds after that, and he says, well, I need you to do an affidavit of just what you said there. So I did a really long affidavit, the whole thing, saying what happened, right? And that Oates told me, the last thing he told me was that he was going to just lose the lawsuit and then declare bankruptcy. And then a very interesting happened. Before they were going to publish that, because they were publishing all the affidavits. Remember, they were doing affidavits for them, putting on the Art Bell website. I get a call from Keith, Roland, and Art Bell, and they're like giggling like a couple little kids, like little girls, And they're saying, hey, we just want to get your permission if we can put this up on the website, because this is really going to piss them off, and this is really going to solve the whole case. It's going to end everything once we put this up. Can we do it? Because I had been pissed off at them, because now they were going to reveal my real name. My real name was at the bottom of this affidavit, and Observer was going to go public, and all these people were stalking me. I was really putting up with a lot of shit from these people. Excuse my language. So they put up, and once they put that thing up, Oates had to agree to settle, because you can't accumulate a debt in contemplation of bankruptcy. You can't say, I'm going to create a debt and then go bankrupt. You can't do that because that disavows the bankruptcy. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's right.
Right.
So, you can't prep your bankruptcy.
Right. So once that happened, now he couldn't declare bankruptcy. He would never get that expunged by bankruptcy, so he had to settle. And they did a settlement. They went on the air, and they apologized to each other. Then they both dropped their charges. Now, I was on a winning streak. I figured, boy, I did great. You know, I solved the case. I felt really good. So, you know, I said, well, let me try. I know Ted Gunderson. Let me give him a call. And I'll settle it. I'll settle that one too. I'm on a roll here. So I called up Ted, and the whole fun thing with Ted too is whenever I would talk to him, the first time I called him, okay, he had been a client for a company I worked for, and people from that company, I became very friendly with them, and one of the women left that company, and she made available to a lot of people the client's direct contact information so we can contact them directly and cut out the middleman and make more money. I was supplying phone company information and stuff like that to this company. It was a company called Action Research. It was the company actually that was involved in that whole HP thing with that girl Carly Fiorini.
Yes.
Yeah, that was that company. It was that whole thing. So they had gone out of business because of HP and stuff like that. So then we'd be able to share numbers and stuff.
Okay.
So from the first time I talked to Ted Gunderson, he got into his head this idea that somehow I was the perfect guy for him because he had these audio tapes or videotapes that he needed dubbed. He needed copies made of them so he could sell them on his website. And he got into his head that I'm the perfect guy to do this for him. So then, and I said, okay, I'll look into it. I don't have any kind of equipment like that, but I'll look into it for you. You know, maybe I want to do it. But I made no commitment to him about this. So every other time I would call him up or he would call me up, the first thing out of his mouth was, well, whatever, you never did those tapes for me, you know? The first thing out of his mouth. So I call him up about the Art Bell thing, and he thinks I'm calling him up about these stupid tapes. You know? And I says, no, man, I'm on a roll here. I'm settling lawsuits here. I says, listen, you know, you and Art Bell would get along great. You know, if you met each other, you both sat down and had a drink together, you're both the same kind of guys. I know you'd right-wing nuts. I know you guys would get along great if you met each other and just talked this out. And he goes, no, Ed, I can't get involved in that because my insurance company is taking care of that. My errors and omissions insurance is taking care of that for me. Okay? And I says, okay, insurance. I says, well, you sure you don't want to settle? He goes, no, I don't want to settle because my insurance company's taking care of that for me. They got the lawyers and stuff like that. I can't get involved. I can't even talk to you about it. So, you know, that's okay, fine. So then later on, his insurance company did settle with Bell. Okay? And then I talked to him again after that, and he says, oh, yeah, you know, man, if I would have known they were going to settle, I thought we were fighting there because I didn't do anything wrong. And he claimed he never said that about Bell, that what happened was a guest on his shortwave radio show was making comments about Bell, and he said, yeah, I heard all about that. But he never actually said, oh, yeah, I have evidence. I investigated this. I know Art Bell's journalist. He never said anything like that.
What was his settlement number? Do you know?
I have no idea. Okay, but I'll tell you something interesting because what I found out later on is that because he had errors and omissions insurance as a private investigator. Okay, I have errors and omissions insurance. It doesn't cover what you say on the radio.
Interesting. So he said that, but he probably had to pay out of pocket if he paid.
No, he had somehow he had some other insurance company handling this for him, either FBI insurance or something else. But it wasn't errors and omissions. Because I told you, later on, I had a client who ran into Ted Gunderson. This is right before his death, down at the L.A. FBI headquarters. He was in there working.
He was always just an FBI.
I don't know, you know, but that's what this guy told me.
Is it true that Gunderson was always?
Oh, I have no idea about that. But I would be surprised if it was. I don't believe a lot of the stuff you hear. You know, and you hear these stories and you meet these people and they're nuts. You know.
So all of that stuff happened in the 96, 97, 98.
Yeah.
That was really the beginning. And do you know what Bell's reach was around that time? How many people were listening?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, he was huge, man. He was huge. Because I was lying in bed one time. Okay. This is before I was married, so it was before 2000, and he was talking about the lawsuit and the feud and stuff like that, and he mentioned Ed Opperman, you know, and I got phone calls the next day from people. Oh, you're the Opperman from Art Bell Show? And I was on Norrie's Coast to Coast, man. I made $45,000 in 3 months, man, from work I got from that show. So it still has a huge reach, but Art Bell had a huge freaking reach. Hey, I'll tell you one more thing that's really weird about the whole Art Bell thing.
Okay.
We had a bunch of conversations back and forth on AOL, okay? And he had some kind of relationship with AOL, some kind of special relationship. He had his own Art Bell group, on AOL, and they gave him this Art Bell name on AOL. And after all this stuff was over for a few months, and things started quieting down, and we weren't in contact anymore, all of our communications back and forth were deleted.
Interesting.
We're gone off of AOL. And then what happened was, another interesting happened. Just as he announced that he was returning to radio, this most recent time when he was going to do with Keith Rowland on that Dark Matter station, George Noory had David Oates on his show.
Wow.
And I guess I emailed Art Bell and I says, "Hey man, do you remember me?" I says, "I can't believe that Noory's doing this." And he emailed me back right away, and he says, "Oh yeah, I remember you. How you been?" Stuff like that. And he says, "I can't believe it. What would be the motivation for him to want to drag all this stuff back up?" So that whole thing was kind of interesting too.
Weird. So it wasn't just a clean transition from Bell to Noory and everything.
Oh no! And even when I was auditioning to get on Noory, I had mentioned how I had settled the Art Bell feud, and that's what perked their ears up to contact me, and they wanted to talk to me off the air about the whole feud and what went on there with that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, Noory's basically helmeting what Bell created, right?
Yeah, and so is Jimmy Church, and all these guys. And they all seem to know each other too. They were all like friendly with each other off the air. But Bell, everyone was jealous of him too. Rents, was behind the scenes.
Interesting. Doing what?
And all this feud stuff, man. He was one of the characters behind the scenes, egging on Rams and egging on and Oates.
Interesting. So he was doing it just to try to be as a competitor against Bell?
Yeah, like all these guys thought they were competing with Bell, but they just had little internet shows, and Bell was freaking huge.
50 million listeners nightly.
Yeah.
Massive. Yeah.
Yeah, well, those little websites that we had, because I was controlling one of those, because they were getting shut down all the time, too, these little message boards, and we would have competing message boards where we were fighting with each other and stuff like that. I had one for a while. It was getting 15,000 unique hits a day. Yeah, the traffic.
Just be associated with Coast to Coast.
Yeah, and the feud and all that stuff that was going on. Because, remember, too, Oates had he had a website, too, and he was going on Rents and these other shows and stuff like that. And then Stevens died. Stevens just died recently, too. I guess I'm the last man standing. Out of all these guys.
I think Rents is still around. I don't know if he has the same stamina that he used to have, but...
Well, but Bell is gone, but Stevens is gone, and Gunderson is gone.
Gone?
Yeah.
About Oates. The Oates is still around, I guess.
Oates is still around. Tragically, he had these twin daughters. One of his twin daughters fell off a building in Australia and died. But Oates, like I said, he just popped back up to go on Noory there, had him on the show, which I thought was really tacky because everyone knew what was going on, and those guys were playing underhanded. They were playing really. But like I said, too, there was that back and forth thing, too, where he had Spam House, he had the Mel's Hole, he had them back on the last show, even though they were up to their necks in all this crap. So there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions in my mind about it. Interesting connection to the West Memphis 3 case is right around that same time, because I was on the phone with Bell every single day. They had no caller ID on those cell phones back then, but if they did, believe me, I would have ditched a lot of these calls, man, because he was calling constantly. But this is when I was first interested in the West Memphis 3. It was around 97, right? And what happened was I contacted Burke Saul, who was one of the Borg, the top 3 there, Kathy Bakken.
KGB.
Right. And
KGB.
And Christopher Worthington, right? And what do you call it? I said to him, hey, I can get you guys on Art Bell. I'm positive I can get you on Art Bell in 5 minutes. And I says, and these other hosts, I knew these other radio stuff. I can get you on this show, I can get you on that show, and I can get you on Art Bell. And Art Bell's wife is a Wiccan. And the first thing Burke Soul came back to me and says, we're really interested in getting on the show with the Wiccan. You know?
Interesting. So they wanted her to co-host or something?
Well, no, but I was saying that that's the show that they wanted to be on. They didn't care about the other shows I can get him on. They wanted to be on that one because his wife was wicked.
Wow, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
So they're probably fellow travelers. What was that? The first wife of?
Yeah, that was the first wife, Ramona. Yeah, she died in the. They were traveling around. I think it was Laughlin, in their motorhome, and she just died unexpectedly. And there was a lot of creepy folks too. These same folks come out of the woodwork all the time, you know. And they were saying, oh, he must have killed her and stuff like that. It must have been, you know. And then he went down to the Philippines. He was living down in the Philippines for a little while, and he met a girl down there. And he married her and brought her up to the States, back to Pahrump, back to that same house in Pahrump.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? You ever heard that one recording he did in 19 so-called ex-Area 51 employee?
Yeah, I've heard all that stuff.
What was the truth? Was that just a bunch of theater too?
Yeah, we talked about this too, okay? And I said, well, why do these people? Why do they get so upset? And he goes, Ed, I'm an entertainer. This is entertainment. I'm not here to start a revolution. I'm not here to disclose. I'm not here to do CIA, stuff. I'm an entertainer. This is entertainment. And I'm convinced he had no problem writing bits and putting it on the air. I'll tell you one interesting thing.
That's what he said. Absolute entertainment.
Yeah.
Master showman.
Yeah, he said, this isn't a news show, man. This is entertainment, and he dragged it out.
Stories, conspiracies.
But you want to hear something weird, man? Okay.
Yes.
Day before this feud started, the day before, because I went back and I looked. See, the whole feud started was he invited Robert A.M. Stevens, on his show to debate Richard Hoagland. The show before that night, what was going on was this. Richard Hoagland was getting into a fight with Ed Dames, right? And they were bickering back and forth. And Hoagland was saying, well, I have sources at the NSA. They're telling me this. They're telling me that. And Ed Dames says back, he says, listen, anybody who you think you got a source, they don't know what they're talking about. Because if they know what they're talking about, they're not talking. So Hoagland got all pissed off at this. And he brings a guy on the air, okay?
Okay.
The guy he brings on the air, his name is Vance. His last name was Vance. I remember that. He worked for the NSA. And you could look him up, and he was involved in that whole big shenanigans with the NSA 6 that got fired because they had Ouija boards and they were doing Scientology and all kind of weird stuff like that. He comes on the show, right? And Richard Hoagland's trotting him out. And here's my NSA guy, and he's got an NSA history. He's been in the news on the NSA, and he's my source for this and that. Tell him this. Tell him that. And Bell's egging him on. He said, well, what else can you tell us there? What else can you tell us? And the guy was running out of things to say, and he says, well, I can tell you that coming up, we have information and chatter that there's going to be an attack by bin Laden in New York City in the fall.
Yep.
Okay.
That was when? That was what year?
97, around then.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh. Okay, and what happened later on? Bin Laden attacked New York City in the fall. But the next day is when this whole big feud started. Maybe the whole thing was a whole big distraction, away from that. Yeah.
Maybe.
Who knows? I look back at all this. I tell you another thing, too. Another weird thing happened, too. Was around that time, because I used to... we had a 3-bedroom house, me and my wife at the time. When I moved to Las Vegas, I was still involved in this whole feud and stuff like that, and this negotiation. One day I Googled myself, and this was on, and then we didn't even have Google back in this. This is before Google. So I Yahoo'd myself, but I did a search for my name on the internet, and I searched Ed Opperman Observer, and I see a picture from the inside of my house, of my computer desk and my office inside my home.
Crazy.
Yeah. Now, the only thing I could think it could go back to was this one woman who was involved in the feud, quote unquote. She was one of the witnesses for David Oates. By some remarkable coincidence, started dating a guy I knew from Staten Island who had moved to Las Vegas, and she started dating a friend of mine, and we did invite them over to dinner one night. But I didn't see her with a camera. I didn't see her, taking pictures, especially in my office, which was all the way around the corner. So I don't know, but I traced it back to that. Kind of interesting, too. That one witness, too, she was on Oprah claiming that her father had molested her. And she was a guest on Oprah, too. So all bizarre connections. some people did have some kind of shadowy connections and stuff like that, but mostly it was hecklers and trolls and spam house characters.
That's wild. Just a bunch of people. I mean, his show was like that too, though. I mean, there was just all kinds of different people from all different stories from all over the place. So many weird Bigfoot, preachers, crazy people from. Right. I mean, it's just such a mix of. It's like a cornucopia of different characters.
And it was all new. No one was doing it before. Even he wasn't doing it. He was doing a right-wing talk show like Rush Limbaugh before that. And then he got into this paranormal. No one was doing this. Now we take it for granted because everybody kind of copied it, you know. Everybody tries to do Art Bell, you know. But he was brand new back then, and he did it for 5 hours a night. You're on the radio. You know what it takes to talk for 5 hours or interview a guest for 5 hours.
Yeah,
it's
brutal. That's incredible stamina to do 5 hours. If he's really, was he doing 5 hours in a row?
Yeah. No taping, and he would go on, you know, and he ran the whole studio himself. He didn't have a producer or anything. It was all out of his office there in Prompt, and he ran the whole thing, you know. And I tell you, too, his house was decorated too. It was like, hey, this guy was making a ton of money, man. This guy was making millions a year.
Interesting. Just, I mean, who were the advertisers on his show?
Sea Crane, the crank, the Sea Crane radio that you cranked it up when the apocalypse came. You can listen to the show. I bought one of those. radios.
And where is it? Is it in the ash bin? Is it in the dust heap? Probably doesn't work.
I had two of them, and one of them still works, and we still keep it. I used to take my daughter to the sprinkle park when she was little. I would wind it up, and then it had a little solar panel on it when the sun would. You didn't need batteries, you know.
Gotcha. So it was perfect for the nuclear war, huh?
Yeah, or Y2K, which is he was a big.
So he was a Y2K proponent.
Oh yeah, he was huge on Y2K, man.
So he would sell Y2K and then probably sell the products after announcing, you know, the end is near, kind of a la Alex Jones.
Well, 5 hours of end is near, you know.
You got to make that purchase.
Yeah, but it was all new back then. Like now, you know, it's people just taking all this stuff and they built on it and built on it and built on it. And so it's just like they live in a whole fantasy world. But he was a level-headed guy, like I said, you know, and a lot of lawsuits. He's had a lot of lawsuits throughout his whole life. If we ever looked, in fact, maybe after the show I'll go online and I'll look up how many lawsuits he had here in Nevada, because he's a very litigious guy for sure.
That's interesting. I mean, what else about him? I mean, there are some rumors about him. He had 4 wives, a kid. I mean, I thought I read somewhere that one of his children he just didn't have any contact with. Is that
that guy contacted me. His son contacted me. He's friends with one of my listeners too. And he's all upset. But the thing is, I tried to talk to that kid, and he's very confused. He doesn't understand, you know, how my relationship to Bell was. He's all confused and stuff like that. I don't think he'd be a good guest on the show. One thing that struck me about Bell, it might be a little gossipy for people, is that, you know, he lived right next to Cherry's Ranch down there.
Is that a prostitution place?
Yeah, it was within walking distance of where he lived. He lived right by Terrible Herbst Casino, which was a nice little casino nearby, and I know he used to go there once in a while. But otherwise, he stayed home. And if he did anything else, I think he once in a while took a walk down there to the brothel.
He was a brothel devotee.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you for a fact, but it's just kind of impression I got just from talking to him and stuff like that.
I mean, maybe that's why he was in Nevada. That's why he made Nevada his home. He was from somewhere else, right?
I really don't know. But he did. When he was in New York for a book signing, right? And I had business in New York in Manhattan that day, so I went to see him at the book signing, you know, and I surprised him. I said him and Ramona because, you know, they recognized me. And what he called. So that like the next day or something like he thought, because he was like a small town kind of guy for sure who didn't really leave his house. So he gave me a call and he wanted me to give him a ride, like in Manhattan, like to come pick him up in Manhattan and take him to another place in Manhattan. You know, to come all the way 2 hours from Staten Island, give him a ride, and then go back home.
That's simple, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they have taxis. Yeah, he's definitely a small town. He was from Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Originally born, he's from North Carolina.
Yeah, military guy, had a military background, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah,
so to make $1 million, why is he living in Parham? What happened to all his money? Did it just go to his last wife?
You know what? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he has that money squirreled away someplace. I think he saved all his money. He's a very frugal guy too, you know, because we hung out one time too at the the Pahrump Winter Harvest Festival. It's a little fair, outdoor fair with rides and stuff like that, and you walk around stuff. And he wasn't quick to spend money throwing darts and stuff like that. At the balloon.
Wasn't he a smoker too?
Oh yeah, man, smoked. Yeah. Yeah, you walked into his house, it stunk, man. It smelled like an old casino. Yeah, heavy smoker, for sure. And it was decorated, too, like something like your grandparents would decorate their house. And he was my age. Just when I met him, he was like 50 years old. He's my age now. But his place was decorated like little things, little knickknacks and tchotchkes and fabric on the wall and stuff like that. Cats, cats walking around. It was a real scene, just to think that this little studio we had in the house there, which was all professional equipment, it was good quality equipment for sure, was, broadcasting to millions and millions of people in this little tiny room from this it was a trailer,
All right, 15 million people, that's an incredible reach.
Yeah.
It's like bigger than any TV show.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So how much time do we have left?
Got about 4 minutes left.
Why don't you tell people where they can, hear more about your stuff?
Oh, that's a good idea. Well, thank you so much for having me on the William Ramsey Investigates show. Yeah, and this was fun. This was fun doing this. I'm glad we came up with this idea. You can find me. You can always Google Opperman Report, and you can find me on my shows are on YouTube. They're on Spreaker, iHeart, iTunes. I'm on KYAH 540 AM 6 days a week and drive time, 8 a.m. drive time. If you want to advertise on the Opperman Report, get great deals, contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com. I'll give you a great deal on that. We've got a special members section at oppermanreport.com with exclusive shows and exclusive content. If you like William Ramsey's show, we have a couple of exclusive shows on there about the West Memphis 3. One with Dale Griffiths, another one with Trench Reznor?
Trench Reynolds.
Trench Reynolds.
Yeah. He's like a true crime writer.
Yeah, we got him on there. And also to stuff about McMartin Preschool, exclusive stuff, and you won't find anywhere else. It's really content I'm proud of. Like people talk about the Franklin cover-up and the conspiracy of silence. I had Tim Tate on my show, and I interviewed him, the producer and director of Conspiracy of Silence. I had him on the show. He talked about meeting Aquino and doing these investigations and stuff. People talk about McMartin Preschool. I had the guy on my show who did the ground-penetrating radar and found that room underneath the garage there. It's exclusive, and no one's ever interviewed this guy before. Exclusively about the people who moved out of a Steve Bannon's porn and meth house. So people talk about Franklin cover-up and stuff like that, and people post this article about the gay call boys taking a tour through the White House, and they post this and they show it to me. I had the guy on. I had the madam who ran that gay escort service, who provided those boys that toured the White House. I had him on the show, Henry Vincent. So great content there at OppermanReport.com, and I can always use memberships to, and it helps William Ramsey too. If you support my show, it helps him because we put him on all our platforms and stuff like that to support William, who does excellent work out there. Thank you so much, William.
Yeah, thank you, and tell him about the tea.
GetTheTea.com. Let me tell you something, guys. We're not kidding around here. Step right up and get some tea. Step right up. Life Change Tea. I've been drinking this tea about 4 months now, and I'm telling you, I've lost weight. I lost about 15 pounds. I was just telling William Ramsey off the show this morning. I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got one glass of tea. I go out. I swam a half mile today. A little while, I'm going to be going on a bike ride. I got a date with a 25-year-old later on today. How's that for 55 years old? GetTheTea.com. You can't beat it. Okay, it cures what ails you and fixes you right up. There's plenty of other stuff on the website too, GetTheTea.com, with herbs and supplements and all kind of fun stuff there.
Excellent, Ed. Thank you very much for being on the show and telling us all about Art Bell and your experience with one of the most influential radio hosts of the last 100 years, for sure.
Yeah, I hope I didn't forget anything about Art Bell. I think I got pretty much everything out. But usually what happens is, because I have a show in my members section about the Art Bell story, and then the next day I remembered more stuff. It was a really fascinating time in my life. I can remember, because when I would call these people, I'd call them from a payphone. Back in those days, I had payphones. And I can remember my employees, I was at the mall payphone. Oh, I got to go. All right, brother.
All right, man. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.